Another bad patch. It seems like it just doesn't end. So the latest patch notes talking about proposed changes to light and heavy attacks. And it says we've been discussing ways to address these issues. They're referring to light weaving with skills in between. Now again, this is it's literally like the government. People are like, we have this issue, let's get the government to fix it. But then when you actually look at the problem was started by the government. And it's the same thing with a lot of these changes. ESO originally, heavy attacks primarily dealt damage, and you had to, for PvP, if you were in the middle of a heavy attack, you could actually be bashed in the middle of a heavy attack, and of course that would stun you, right? So you had to time when you use your heavy attacks. You couldn't just sit there and resto heavy somebody while you're standing literally point blank in front of them, because you would get bashed immediately, and then you get countered and you eat a lot of damage because it automatically CC'd you. Even if you had CC immunity, there was interrupt was different, obviously, than CC, whereas now it's not. Now if you have CC immunity, you can't bash people out of certain abilities. And so that kind of got removed from the game, and that was a peg lower in terms of the skill gap between learning to time abilities, learning to time when you can utilize a heavy attack to gain back resources. And so that level of skill was removed from the game. And so what we have here are just ZeniMax introduced problems, and then they realized, several years later, that a lot of the changes that they made need to be reverted. And of course, they get reverted in a very poor way. It says, additionally, we believe the over-reliance on a specific mechanic, such as light attack weaving, which was their fault, because they increased the damage to light attack so that any person who's literally just spamming their left click button deals quite a good amount of damage. If you've ever looked at a parse, especially for PvE, a light attack weaving is like 20% of your parse damage. But then prior to the change, people didn't like being forced to heavy attack for damage. So that will equally propose a problem for like endgame PvE players. I don't even think there are endgame PvE players anymore, because the player base is so casual that I think the change is like almost irrelevant. I think what you are seeing is, especially with the current changes that they've made, are just continual changes, basically just to continually dumb down the game, to make the game as casual and less skill based as possible. And that is right here. It says, while we believe it's good to have a skill cap that promotes mastery, we also believe that the gap as it currently exists is too wide. And that's primarily ZeniMax's fault. Because when you introduce numerous proc sets, and when you dumb down your PvE, players never learn mechanics, right? I mean, they even have a set in the game that CC breaks for you. And so if you can't learn to press your left and right mouse button together at the same time, ZeniMax says, well, don't worry, we'll do that for you. And so it's in that environment that there is no end, right? This crazy train has no brakes. And this will be the continued downgrading of the game's ability in combat, for there to be any sort of mastery, right? If you've been playing the game for 5 years, well, then your skill gap is your ability to play well. It's too high. We need to artificially bring it down. Do you know how to animation cancel and weave light attacks in between abilities? We need to put an end to that, because you're steamrolling through our super casuals, and we want to make them feel like they're competitive. And I had been saying this for quite some time, that the introduction of proc sets and the continued reliance on proc heals, proc damage, proc mitigation is literally just to make it so that the casual player feels better about themselves when they get packed up by someone who is more skilled than they are. And then they end up respawning on the forums and say, you need to nerf this, you need to nerf this class, or this person is using cheat engine, or this person is cheating, etc. And people just don't want to get better. And it's in this environment that ZeniMax literally continues to place players on this little wheel where they just keep running and trying to attain to be like the higher level skilled players. And no matter what ZeniMax does, there is no way to do that without the company playing for you. And this is what I said. When you're fighting, if you're, for example, when you're fighting against somebody, and like just the other day, I was playing and some guy's Zons procced, and the person was literally running in the opposite direction because I was killing them. They were losing. And so his Zon proc, and while he's running away, his Zons is sitting there hitting me, which forces me to disengage and try to heal through it. But then I'm getting hit by somebody else. So the damage just becomes too much. But the player that I'm attacking was actually losing the fight. But ZeniMax stepped in with a Zon proc. And of course, I was playing on a class and I didn't have access to anything to mitigate the Zon. Whether, I was playing on my Nightblade, but I wasn't utilizing Cloak. I was using the heal. So I ended up dying and I took like a 9,000, a 9k Zon damage. But the person that I was fighting didn't do any damage to me. It was all ZeniMax and then that other player that ended up engaging against me. And so this is ESO's perpetual problem of doing their very best to handhold their player base. And as a result, this is what you get. Every patch after patch after patch will result in the continued, they even refer to it here. It says combat in ESO is one of the things that truly separates our games from others like it. It's action-oriented, fast-paced, not so much if you're playing PvP, because the lag just overtakes you, skills don't fire, you get server lag, high ping, dropped frames, etc. It says, and it gives you a lot of freedom over its various mechanics / interactions. It's balanced with ability not with ability cooldowns, but via ability costs and resource pools. And we've seen, as a result of the numerous changes, where they just keep on increasing costs, because they keep introducing sets that make it super easy to sustain, especially if you play in CP PvP. There's so much free sustain, especially with proc sets. If you utilize any sort of proc set for damage, that just by nature gives you sustain. If you use a proc heal, that just by nature gives you sustain, because then you don't have to waste those resources to heal yourself. This happens quite often. I mean, you ever in the middle of killing somebody and you're just about to kill them, and all of a sudden an Earth Core goes off and that person's HP shoots right back up to full, and then a Templar ult goes off, and then you're literally stuck having to do the exact same rotations all over again, wait for your ultimate so that you can burst that opponent down again. And it's like, but normally that person would die. And then a smart player would be like, well, what the fuck did I do wrong so that I can make changes in the future to do better? But when ZeniMax steps in and saves that individual from dying via a proc set, well, then that person never learns, right? I mean, if you never really learn how to combo, but all you utilize is 3 different proc sets, it makes it a lot easier for you to kill people and to do on par damage with someone who's skilled, who doesn't rely on proc sets. And I've said this time and time again. And so when you get a good player who utilizes those exact same sets, there is no substitution for skill. The only thing that you can do is artificially handhold the person who is less skilled and try to bring them up, and then artificially push down skilled players. And of course, this is also seen in the line here where they talk about combat in ESO is one of the things that truly separates our game. It's fast-paced. It says here, we found that players love this freedom, and there are always a button to press or an action to take at any point in combat. And then they go into, there are, however, several drawbacks to this model as well. And it's very interesting that they think of this as a drawback, right? It says, first, it tends to reward players for pushing buttons as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that's just human nature. The human mind works to do things most efficiently as possible, just by nature. That's why if you work out, and you do the same workout routine over and over and over again, the body remembers the mechanics. It remembers the motions that you did. There's muscle memory involved. And so what happens is, if you always lifted, 25-pound dumbbells, after a while, your body just gets used to it. And then you have to continue to add more and more pressure to grow. And that's just like anything in life. When you do things repetitively, your brain, your body, your muscles will remember, because that's the body's way of efficiently working. The body learns to do things in an efficient way. And it's ironic that ZeniMax actually looks at this as a drawback. It says players with high actions per minute significantly outperform those with low actions per minute, as they have a better uptime on abilities, higher mitigation, much higher DPS, and can simply move around the battlefield better in both PvE and PvP. And this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, that this is actually a drawback. Imagine if we did this with sports and somebody was just faster than the competition and we were like, you're too fast. Take this weighted vest because you're literally blowing out all of the competition. Or you strike too fast, your punches are too quick, so here are these weighted mittens so that your punches are not as fast. Or you lift, you're too strong, so we're artificially going to hold you back. In a scenario like that, nobody grows. That's the whole purpose of trying to be the best, because everybody pushes themselves to be better. And as a result, everybody gets better, because when you start to see that guy putting in extra work, you're like, shit, I better not slack, because this person might overtake me if I start to slack, and I think shit is sweet. So it causes the person who's at the top to keep working harder, and it causes the people who are coming up to keep on chasing after that individual. And so what happens is everybody gets better, right, as a result. So the opposite of that, when you artificially hold people back, well, the opposite is true. Everybody gets worse. That's just the reality of the way we as humans work. And the only reason that I can understand why you would do this as a company is you're literally worried about people's feelings. People post on the forums and their feelings are hurt that this person is better than me. Well, that's fucking life. I mean, there's people that are smarter than me. There's people that are faster than me. There's people that are stronger than me. I make the choice to get smarter. I make the choice to get stronger, etc. So I can't understand why they would choose to do this if it's literally just to appease the super casual players who just have no interest in getting better. And it's very sad when you think about that, like I said in one of my previous posts, that ZeniMax really must not think much about their community. If you really think your community needs this much handholding, you probably don't respect your player base.